Welcome back viewers, I am Surbhi Unyal. I teach philosophy at Hansraj College, University of Delhi, and we have been doing a series on philosophy of mind. In the present lecture, we have been discussing about the JJC Smart's identity theory, and in our last lecture we discussed how Smart he started his arguments in his paper Sensations and Brain Processes while talking about the after image, and he gives 4 hypotheses of how while reporting an after image, what is it that we are actually reporting. And he specifically took the 4th type of reporting, which is in reporting an after image we are reporting a brain process, which in fact is the identity theory. So, Smart's identity theory sees that sensations are brain processes. So, the thesis, as we discussed earlier, is not that the terms like after image or ache have same meaning as brain processes. In fact, if a sensation is being reported, then it is a report of a process that happens to be a brain process, and that is where we can see the identity here, which is that sensation is a brain process. So, if you are reporting any of your sensation, what you are really doing is you are reporting the process that is happening in your brain. And this means that the thesis does not propose that statements about sensations can be translated into the statements about brain processes. And it does not mean that the logical structure of the sensation statements are identical to that of the brain process statement. They are only proposing that sensations are brain processes, but it does not mean that the statements about sensations can be translated into brain processes statement, or the logical structure of sensation statement is identical to that of brain process statement. So, this thesis being proposed is that sensations are not separate from brain processes. Rather, sensations are brain processes themselves. Therefore, a sensation statement is a report of a brain process, which happens to be the thing being reported. However, as mentioned earlier, this does not imply that sensation statements can be translated into brain process statements, or that their logic is the same. And to describe that, Smart uses the analogy of nations and citizens to clarify what he means when he is saying that we cannot translate sensation statements to be to brain processes statements. So, he says that that if something is not over and above something else, where if we are using statements like that of nation or citizenship, it is used to clarify that even if something is not over and above something else, the logic and the structure of their respective statements can still be distinct. So, even though we know that they are related, yet the logic of the statements of about citizens and that about nation can be distinct. So, Smart compares sensations and brain processes with that of nation and its citizens. We find that there is no existence of nation without its citizens, although the logic of nation statements and the logic of citizen statements are very different. As the nation statement cannot be translated into citizen statements, so the sensation statements cannot be translated into brain processes statement, just like how we cannot translate nation statements into that of the citizen statements. And that's how he explains that how though sensations are brain processes, but this does not mean that the logic of sensation statements and that of brain processes statements would be the same. They can still be different, and yet we can assert that sensations are brain processes. Now let us look at the remarks on identity which Smart makes in this paper. So Smart says that when he asserts that a sensation is a brain process, or that lightning is an electric discharge, he is using the word is in the sense of strict identity. Much like when he says that 7 is identical to the smallest prime number greater than 5. So in saying that sensation is brain process, or lightning is an electric discharge, he is using the term is in a very strict sense. So he is using the strict sense of identity here. And if you want to understand what is the strict sense of identity, or what are the various theories of identity, you can get back to our previous lectures where we gave an introduction about what is an identity theory and what are the various types of identity. So here Smart is using the strict identity theory, where he is not saying that sensations and brain processes, they share similar qualities and therefore they are identical. He is not taking that kind of an analysis here. He is taking a strict sense of identity by establishing that sensation is a brain process, and is here is used in a very strict sense. That means they're one and the same thing. Just like how when he says that 7 is identical to the smallest prime number greater than 5. So that is in a very strict sense, because there would be nothing else if you give this particular description other than that of 7. So when he makes these claims, he don't just mean that the sensation is connected to the brain process in a spatial or a temporal sense, or that lightning is merely connected to the discharge in a spatial sense. However, when he claims that a successful general is the same person as the small boy who stole apples, he is only suggesting that the successful general he sees is a later time slice of the same 4-dimensional object of which the small boy is an earlier time slice. So he makes this distinction to emphasize that brain process theory posits strict identity, and by establishing that there is a strict sense of identity between sensations and brain processes, or to say that sensation is brain process in a very strict sense of identity, Smart then moves on to discuss some of the objections that could be raised against his theory of identity, and he gives responses to those objections. So the first objection is that he says that people can talk about and know things about sensations without talking about and knowing things about brain processes. So sensations are not brain processes. So he is saying that he could be criticized, or the objection can be raised, that there are illiterate people who can talk about and know things about sensations without actually knowing the neurological processes or the brain processes. This means that sensations are not brain processes, because these people do not really know the brain processes, and they could only know or talk about sensations without actually knowing the brain processes. So to this objection, Smart's response was that he replies it that there can be statements of the form A is identical with B, where the person knows something is A but not B. So he takes two identity theories that he thinks are uncontroversial, which is that the morning star is equal to the evening star and lightning is equal to electrical discharge. He notes that people can or seem to know things about lightning without knowing things about electrical discharge. But that does not show that lightning is not in fact identical to the electrical discharge. Just so the fact that people can be ignorant of the fact that sensations are brain processes does not show that sensations are not in fact brain processes. Fine. So what he's saying here is that people could be ignorant. And in the sense of talking about the identity between A is identical with B, people could know just A without knowing B. But this does not show that sensations are not brain processes or that A is not B. Just like the case of morning star is equal to the evening star, or that lightning is equal to electrical discharge. So people might know what lightning is, but it's not necessary that they would know what an electrical discharge is. But they not knowing that lightning is equal to electrical discharge would their not knowing would not make this claim false that lightning is electrical discharge. In the similar manner, people could know, or may know what sensation is without actually knowing what brain processes are, what are the neurological processes taking place in their brain. But this does not mean that sensations are not brain processes. The second objection is that the criticizers or those who are objecting them would say that the correlation between sensation and brain processes is only contingent. The fact that there is a certain kind of process in the brain when we have a certain kind of sensation is only a contingent fact, and it is possible that our current understanding of neurophysiology could be outdated in the future, just as the ancient theory linking mental processes with heart function is now considered outdated. So sensations cannot be identical to the brain process, because let's say it's only contingent, and maybe in future we'll get rid of such kind of an understanding because it would turn out to be outdated. Maybe we'll have better theories and better ways to determine that these are not identical. So it's only contingent and it's only true for the moment, and maybe it would turn out to be false in the future and would be considered as outdated. Smart's response to this is that while it is true that when we say I have an after image, we cannot mean I have such and such a brain process. It doesn't necessarily mean that what we are reporting, having an after image, is not in fact a brain process. So similarly, when we say I see lightning, we are not saying that I see an electrical discharge. It's logically possible, though unlikely, that the electrical discharge theory of lightning might one day be discredited. Likewise, I see evening star does not mean the same thing as I see morning star. Yet, the evening star and the morning star are one and the same thing. It is a fact that it is contingent on our knowledge and observation. Still, we know that morning star is the evening star. So he says that objection 2 is derived from Fido theory. This theory suggests that meaning of an expression is the same as the thing it names. If this were true, then it would follow that since sensations and brain processes have different meanings, they cannot refer to the same thing. Coming now to objection 3. Here it says that even if sensations of a particular kind of mental events are brain processes, the properties of those sensations, for example being a yellow flash, are still irreducibly psychical. So, we are still left with a realm of irreducibly psychical items as the dualists claim. And to this Smart responds that it is the strongest among the others with which he has to deal. So, this objection he considers to be the strongest objections amongst all, and he feels that he has to deal with this kind of objection here. So, in this connection he refers property of being a yellow flash and says that this property might lie outside the physicalist framework, and this laying is inevitable. So, when someone is reporting that they are seeing something, that is a yellow after image, they are merely saying that I am seeing something which is of the same, which is of the sort of the image I would see if these conditions would apply. And what are these conditions? That I am awake, my eyes are open, and the yellow is the color of the bananas. So, the logic of sensation is metaphysically neutral. That means that not presupposing a materialistic or dualistic sense because of how he defines properties of experience are above, as above. Therefore, this objection does not disapprove of the claim that sensations are merely brain processes. However, Smart does acknowledge that his claim is based on the abstraction of to the extent someone is able to say X is Y without knowing how they relate to each other. So, that's what he is trying to respond to those criticisms that were raised against the identity theory. Now, the fourth objection is that brain processes occurs in physical space, but the after image is not, and therefore it is not correct to say that after image is a brain process. And to this Smart says that his argument is not like that the after image is a brain process, rather experience of having an after image is a brain process. So, our introspective report is about the experience. Again, objection may come from the critics that an after image is yellow orange, but there is nothing yellow orange in the brain even if a surgeon looks into it. And to this Smart says that here the description is about the experience of seeing the yellow orange, and this experience itself is not yellow orange something. So, it is not basically talking about yellow orange something present in the brain. In fact, it is talking about the experience of seeing the yellow orange and not a yellow orange something. Coming now to objection 5, which is that brain processes can be swift or slow, but sensations cannot be. So, sensations are not brain processes. Here he says that he never intended that experience could be swift or slow or straight or circular. He never claims that the meaning of the term experience and brain processes are same, or even these two terms have same logic. So, he is not saying that he argued for that. And in this connection he says, or, and I quote, that all that I am saying is that experience and brain process may in fact refer to the same thing. And if so, we may easily adopt a convention which is not a change in our present rules for the use of experience words, but an addition to them, whereby it would make sense to talk of an experience in terms appropriate to physical processes. Coming now to objection 6th, and in this objection it is said that sensations are private, brain processes are public. These are personal to him, no other person have it. He is epistemically in a privileged position to access it, but such privilege cannot be ascribed in the case of brain processes which are rather publicly observable. And what do we mean by making this kind of division between private and public? So here the critics, they say that sensations are private. They are private to us, they are private to the person who is having those sensations. And it is not observable, it is very personal to the person who is having those sensations, and they cannot be epistemically known by the other. So the person who is having those sensations, only he can have access to it. So he is in that privileged position that only he can experience his own sensations. So it's very private and it's very personal to that specific person who is having those sensations. In contrast, brain processes are public. So we can, through scanning, see what's really happening in the brain, what are the neurological processes that are taking place in the brain. So it's a doctor or somebody who can do a scan of your brain is able to see what is really happening in the brain. So it is in that sense public. So how can these two things be same? If on the one hand we are saying that sensations are private, and on the other hand we are saying that brain processes are public. If these two things refer to two different ways of observing and knowing them, how could they be seen as identical? And that is precisely the objection that is being raised here, that such privilege cannot be ascribed in the case of brain processes. So even if you want that your brain processes should not be known by the other, but still it can be publicly observable through the process of scanning, while it cannot be the case with sensations. So it is wrong on the part of someone who says that he sees a yellowish orange after image. There is nothing verbal mistake made in that case. But the same is wrong when he says about the brain processes. It might be the case that the same brain process is observed by two or more people, but the inner experience of someone cannot be reported by anyone except the experiencer or except the one who is experiencing it. So sensations in that case are very private, while brain processes are public and they can be in a way shared by other people. So the response here which Smart gives is that he says that the logic of language of introspective report and the logic of language of the reports for material processes are not the same. But that does not mean they aren't the same. So he is trying to answer this from the point of view of logic of language, and he says that the logic of language when you report a material process is very different from the logic of language of an introspective report. But this does not mean that they are they are not same. Coming now to the seventh objection, which is someone can imagine that he himself is turned into a stone and yet he possesses the capacity to imagine, have feelings of pain, aches and other things. To this smart response is that this is the closest that smart gets to considering Descartes' conceivability argument. His reply is predictable. That means we can also imagine that lightning is not electrical discharge and that this does not show that lightning is not in fact an electrical discharge. The last objection, which is the eighth objection, is the beetle in the box objection, which was specifically be related to Wittgenstein. That if everyone had a beetle in the box and could only look at their own box, how does one know that they are all referring to the same thing? There could be nothing in the box or something different for every person. So this objection is different from the others as it is not arguing that sensations are not brain processes, but more than the language we use refer to this public definition of the word and is not truly representative of what pain is to each person. This is because we can never be certain that my pain is the same that you feel. And the response given here is that he counters this objection by saying that the individual is merely switching frames when they are talking about sensations, going from there is a pain to which imply the phrase it feels to me to be painful, switching from terms that deal with environment around us to a private experience of our senses. So Smart really doesn't tackle the beetle in the box objection, as it seems not really an objection to his hypothesis at all. And with this we come to an end of our lecture by discussing what is the identity theory proposed by J.J.C. Smart, what are the various objections that were faced by identity theory and how J.J.C. Smart responded to those objections. So thank you viewers, thank you for watching our lectures and hope to see you in the next lecture where we will be taking up the other theory in philosophy of mind. Thank you.